I'm Anahita Shams, a journalist with a deeply held passion for wine. I'm flying over some of the most famous vineyards in the world and drinking some of the finest of fine wines.
In the mouth, the minority, you lick the stomach.
All in a quest to discover the origin of my beloved Shiraz wine.
Sakartvelos Galamarjos.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It might come as a surprise, but my country, Iran, has a long and ancient history of drinking, producing, and exporting wine.
This is it. This is the oldest wine jar in the world.
The city of Shiraz has always been at the heart of Iranian winemaking and lends its name to one of the world's most famous wines, Shiraz.
This is what's great about Shiraz. It's always been a very soulful wine.
What is the connection between winemaking in Iran and the Shiraz we drink today? Is it just serendipity that it's named after an Iranian city, or is there more to it than meets the eye? To find out, I'm going to undertake a journey of discovery from prehistory to the modern day. This is beautiful, overlooking the lake. For the story of Persian wine is the history of the origin of wine itself. I've been researching and studying wine for many years. Recently, I've completed a wine course in Hungary. I'm here today to receive my qualification and so be initiated into the Hungarian Nights of Wine. Their main goal is to recover the beautiful nightly virtues of wine, and their membership is open to all who share their passion for wine.
Shams Anahita.
Lovagrendünk bortanácsosává fogadni.
Learning about wine is not something I can do in my own country. In 1979, winemaking in Iran officially came to an abrupt halt. The Islamic Revolution had no tolerance for the production or drinking of alcohol. Commercial vineyards were ripped up, wineries shut down, and a wine culture that went back generations went underground. Currently in Iran, there is no easy way to research the provenance of Shiraz wine or its influence on Persian culture. So to unravel the mystery behind the origin of Shiraz wine, I need to visit one of Iran's neighbors, Georgia, where many believe winemaking began. Here in the Caucasus Mountains, the wild grape Vitis vinifera has proliferated for millions of years. It was domesticated around 8,000 years ago in Neolithic times. It is the common ancestor to 99% of the world's wine today. Georgia claims to be the first country to have cultivated wine. The methods used then are still in use today, and the culture of winemaking and drinking has entered into the very soul and identity of the Georgian people. So much so, they believe they are the cradle of wine civilization. Now, an amazing archaeological discovery has put Georgia not just at the center of ancient winemaking, but of human evolution itself. "85 kilometers southwest of the capital, Tbilisi, is the ancient site of Dmanisi. Whilst excavating this Bronze Age settlement, complete with ancient wine jars, archaeologist David Lord Kipanitz unearthed something extraordinary. Hard evidence that primitive man inhabited Europe much earlier than previously thought.
Wow. Tell me, what is the most significant discovery in this site?
Here we found earliest presence of humans in whole Eurasia. It dates back 1.8 million years ago. We have 5 human skulls. This is most complete skull ever found in the world from this time period.
They found evidence of winemaking dating back thousands of years.
Not far away from here, 30 kilometers, we have traces of very early agriculture. Humans were living with groups and they were already using stone tools. And we found also very early presence of cultivated grapes. So in this territory, in this surrounding, we have early humans and we have very early agriculture too.
It is amazing. The prehistory of mankind has been rewritten here in the Mana Sea. Our ancestors lived here 1.8 million years ago. Later, they began to cultivate crops such as wild grapes, which still grow in this mountainous region.
Today, there are vineyards across the length and breadth of Georgia, the domesticated descendants of the wild grapes. Modern-day winemakers are rediscovering the ancient ways of making wine.
John?
Yes, Anahita.
Oh, you're here.
Right here.
Oh, hello.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Very nice
How
to
are you?
meet you.
Nice to
You
meet
okay?
you. Doing well.
John Warderman runs a successful winery. He's inspired by the fact that wine's been grown here for millennia.
Evidence of the cultivation of the Vitis vinifera grape has been found here in southern Georgia. To imagine that the early Neolithic man living on the territory of what we call Georgia today was already farming different types of grapes, creating new varieties for their aesthetic pleasure is absolutely marvelous. Even more marvelous, they never stop.
What sets Georgia apart is the traditional way they still make their wine.
So here, this is the place, what we call the marani, which is the cellar, where it all happens.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a small qvevri. It's a womb-like vessel. And the word qvevri itself is fascinating because it means that which is buried in the ground. The earth gives you the grapes. They get crushed and they go down inside the qvevri. But the temperature of the earth that's surrounding the mass of the must is the same as what the mother vine is experiencing just a few meters over there. It's a great example of something that is at once very ancient, but very current and modern at the same time.
The qvevri is used for fermentation, aging, and storing wine.
How does
The qvevri
affect the taste of the wine?
Well, so many of the wines that are made in qvevri are the so-called orange wines or long skin macerated whites. In Georgia, we prefer to call them amber wines. This is truly a very unique and special type of wine.
Wow.
And so this is actually made from a white grape.
Really?
There's lots of surprising things in Georgian
Yes.
wine. I feel that it's like hibiscus and orange rind and citrus flowers and even carcade, the tea they make in Egypt. Let's drink for Georgia.
Yes.
Sakartvelos Galmargos.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Georgia has been invaded, occupied, and fought over for centuries by its more powerful neighbors, including Iran. Today in the capital Tbilisi, the statue of Kartlis Deda overlooks the city. She symbolizes the importance of wine to Georgian culture, as she holds in her left hand a bowl of wine to greet those who come as friends. And in her right hand is a sword for those who come as enemies. In Iran, drinking wine from a horn is an ancient custom, and it is here too.
I've been told about a restaurant. The owner has a fantastic collection of horns, the one that you can drink wine from. I'm gonna meet him now. Laura Saab, what a collection you have. You Georgian people still drink from these horns?
We do. We've been drinking millenniums and we continue. It's a part of the culture. Georgians consider wine to be holy liquid. When people get together, they're choosing one who's much more eloquent and respected, and with poetry or singing skills, and with ability to drink a little bit more than others. And so this called tamada, toastmaster.
I heard that this shape helps people to drink wine in just one go.
Tradition, you're drinking, you're fill it up.
Yes.
Totally.
It has to be filled up, yes?
Yeah, it has to be, and you're drinking like at one go. It's giving like some kind of like fire to the parties.
Okay.
You know that Georgian would never drink wine without saying a toast, so
Perfect, yes.
let's say toast. We've seen after the collapse of the Soviet Union terrible things in Georgia, and I hope it will never happen, and peace to everywhere.
I'm gonna toast back from a poem from Hafiz Shirazi, from Iranian poet. It says, پیر میخانه همی خواند معمایی دوش از خط جام که فرجام چه خواهد بودن.
Cheers.
Witnessing Georgia's wine culture makes me want to discover more about Iran's place in the history of wine. The wild grapes that grew across the mountain regions of Georgia, Armenia, and eastern Turkey also flourished in the Zagros Mountains and penetrated deep into Iran. My country has an ancient tradition of wine culture. I grew up being told the myth of how wine was discovered. A beautiful courtesan at the court of the mythological King Jamshid lost favor. Overwhelmed with pain and sorrow, the courtesan tried to poison herself by drinking juice from a jar filled with fermenting grapes. After experiencing the juice's intoxicating effects, she fell fast asleep. The next morning, the beautiful young lady awoke and she discovered she was no longer depressed, but felt rejuvenated instead. She took her discovery to the king, who became so enamored with this new potion that he accepted her back. She regained the king's favor and wine was drunk in his court. Archaeology tells the real story of where and how wine was first cultivated in Iran. In 1968, at Haji Firuz, a village in the Zagros Mountains, a team of archaeologists from the Penn Museum in the United States uncovered a Neolithic kitchen with 6 mysterious jars. 4 of those jars remain in Iran. The other 2 went to America, and it was only after new scientific methods were available that one of the pots gave up its biggest secret. I'm in Philadelphia to meet the foremost expert in biomolecular archaeology, who uncovered the vessel's purpose.
Oh, hello.
Patrick.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
And I want to show you the oldest
Yes,
wine jar
please.
in the world.
Yes,
please.
thank you. So Patrick, this is the 7,000 years old jar.
This is it. This is the oldest chemically identified wine jar in the world.
Years after finding the jar, a new chemical test for analyzing wine residues was discovered. Patrick decided to re-examine the Iranian Neolithic jar and in particular a red patch that could be seen with the naked eye.
Try to take a look down there and see. They're very
That area?
right. Mostly toward the bottom, you will see, very small areas of reddish material, which then I was given permission by the destructive testing committee of the museum to scrape out a small sample, and then we carried out the same analyses and were able to determine that, in fact, we had a wine jar. Now, the other 4 jars, they're in the Tehran Museum, but no one has ever gone there to get samples out of those 4 jars and see if they all contained wine. Because if they all contain wine, this is a 9-liter jar. So if we had 6 jars, we have about 50 liters, which for an average family is a pretty good wine cellar. We're really talking about a lot of wine. So it suggests that they've already taken the grapevine into domestication, because the advantage of the domesticated grapevine is it has the male and female on the same flower. So it's able to produce a lot more grapes, a lot more wine. Very close to these jars were found stoppers that fit exactly the diameter. And then the other thing they would do is put a tree resin in it that has antioxidant properties that kill off the bacteria that could cause it to go to vinegar. Here's Iran with all this technology about winemaking in this very early period. It's just astounding.
What about Shiraz city?
The earliest evidence we have of grapes from Shiraz is around 2500 BC. But the wild grape did not grow in Shiraz, so it cannot have been domesticated in Shiraz. That can only mean that they were starting to transplant the grapevine from farther north. And eventually they got to Shiraz, which has this great affinity or association with wine.
So wine cultivation started in the north, made its way down the Zagros mountains, and then onto the plains of Shiraz over thousands of years.
Since I've known that we got permission to film this jar, I've had butterflies in my stomach to finally see a receptacle that held wine made over 7,000 years ago. How remarkable is that?
The city of Shiraz was famous for the splendor of its wine. Shiraz wine was exported both east and west, and its many delights were captured in the wonderful poetry of Hafiz, who wrote in the 14th century and whose tomb is at the heart of the city.
My sad heart weeps. Hear the tavern keeper who counsels you. With wine, with red wine your prayer carpet dye. There was never a traveller like him but knew the ways of the road and the hostelry.
In the 17th century, 300 years after Hafiz's death, a Frenchman, Jean Chardin, traveled to Iran and was commissioned to create jewelry for the reigning Shah, Abbas II. Chardin stayed in the region for over 9 years. His account of Iranian society, the Safavid Shahs, and their love of wine is a major source of information to modern-day historians.
When we want to love, we love. When we want to kiss, we kiss.
I've come to Chardin's hometown, Paris, to meet an expert who's studied these sources about the Shiraz wine trade, Francis Richards.
In Iranian history, we know about Shirazi wine or Shiraz wine. What can you tell us about Shirazi or Shiraz wine?
What is historically sure that from the 16th century, it started to be production of a good wine, a fine wine, with the name of Shiraz, wine of Shiraz, and its production was well attested in documents since the beginning of 17th century. According to Chardin, these lands were under the direct control of the Shah. Shiraz wine was a very specific red wine. It was a wine with good conservation, because generally the local wines in Iran, they are very quickly vinegar.
Chardin published the first volume about his travels in 1686 and wrote a further 9, which were later translated into Persian.
Absolutely. He was an extremely curious man. He was a merchant who sold diamonds and precious stones to the Shah.
For Professor Rudi Mati, an expert on early Iranian history and society, the volumes of Chardin have also been a rich source of information.
At the time, who did produce wine in Iran?
The producers were, for the most part, as far as we know, Armenians and Georgians, Christians in general, and Jews were involved in wine production as well.
It is very interesting you mentioned Georgia. What was the relation, in terms of viticulture between Iran and Georgia in that time?
It's a ceremonial drink in Christianity, and since Georgia is a Christian country, it was completely integrated into life. And it was brought into Iran in part because of the massive transplantation of Georgians into Iran proper. Shah Abbas resettled thousands of Georgians and Armenians from their homeland, and of course they brought with them their taste for wine.
Because Iran was a Muslim country, permission to buy the wine was limited to the Shah, families at the court, and foreign companies for export. So how much did the Safavid rulers drink?
The Safavids have 9 successive Shahs, from Shah Ismail comes to power in 1501, till Shah Sultan Hussein, who loses his throne and his life in the early 1720s. And they were all drinkers. Some of them were massive drinkers, either inside or outside of the palace.
Were they all men who drink wine?
It's mostly male, and it's in part because of the nature of our sources, because most of the travelers, and they are the best informants, because again, you don't get that information out of the local, and certainly not the official sources. You really have to wait until the 19th century when you do have a number of sort of these intrepid Victorian ladies who go to Iran, and they do report on women too. But it's definitely a far cry in terms of quantity and incidence compared to the male part of society.
In Iran, the job of pouring the wine was given a special status, which is reflected in Persian art and poetry.
The wine pourer, or how we call it, saqi, normally they were women.
No, they were.
Or actually in the pictures, what
men.
we see, the saqi is a woman.
Yeah, but it's really a man dressed up as a woman. The saqi, just like the dancers, they were oftentimes women. Georgian boys, oftentimes dressed up as women.
Are we sure about this?
Yes, pretty sure, absolutely. Dancing was, of course, not a reputable occupation, so they were almost invariably Armenians and also Georgians, enlivening the banquets of the Shah.
Shiraz wine was exported in expensive glass bottles to India, Indonesia, China, and Japan.
We have some information about quantities. There's one figure in, I think, 1715-16 when they export something like 625,000 bottles or something like that, which is quite a lot.
Another intrepid French merchant, Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, was also doing business in Iran in the 17th century. He too wrote a record of his adventures. When he traveled on to India, he took with him the perfect gift.
He gave a box of Shiraz wine, and it was much appreciated, he writes, by these people. They drank a lot of Iranian wine, and especially Shiraz wine. The name of Shiraz wine was renowned.
Shiraz as a city became, associated with free living, unrestrained wine drinking. That was a trope that evolved over time among Iranians themselves as well as in the West.
I am flying along the northern Rhone Valley, about 50 kilometers south of Lyon in southern France. Below me, the famous Hermitage vineyards with their iconic chapel. Legend has it that these vineyards originated from a Persian vine. In France, the vines and the wine they produce are called Syrah. The reason I've come here is to find out if there is a connection between these Syrah vines and the vineyards of Shiraz.
The French believe that Syrah, the grape, was born here in Hermitage, in the northern Rhone Valley. Here in these 142 hectares, the finest French Syrah is produced.
Below the vineyards lies the town of Hermitage. It owes its wealth to Syrah's fame. And it is here that legendary winemaker Michel Chapoutier has his winery.
Here in your winery and in your vineyard, you are making a real, truly fine wine. How do you achieve it?
At first, we are working in Hermitage, which is one of the most famous vineyards in France. Also one of the oldest, because the vineyard were here 4th century before the Christ.
The vineyard is named after the story of a crusader knight, Gaspard de Sternberg, who was wounded in a battle during the Crusades in the 13th century. Legend has it that on his return he brought back the Persian vine, planted it, and retired from the world, becoming a hermit, hence the name Hermitage.
We did some research, and it is a legend, and there is no real truth behind, because here we were speaking of the 13th century, and we know today that it was more 4 or 5 centuries before the Christ that the vineyard was planted here.
To find out more about the origin of the Syrah grape, the French turned to science, sending their vines to be DNA tested. José Villemos is an internationally renowned grape geneticist.
José, can you tell me more about the grapes DNA test?
The origin of Syrah is fascinating. We've heard many stories about its origin. Some people think it comes from Persia, some other think it comes from Sicily, where you have Syracuse city. And we know today that all of it is wrong, because we found the parents. It was done in 1998 by 2 different labs, and this collaboration ended up in the discovery of the parents of Syrah, because grapes, like humans, have a mother and a father. And it was really a surprise to find out that Syrah is a natural, spontaneous crossing between 2 local vines from this area. The first one is Dureza, an old variety from Ardèche, south from here we are in Northern Valley. And the other one is Mondeuse Blanche from Savoie, north from here.
Does DNA test show the age of the grape?
With DNA testing, you have no idea of the age of the grape variety, or you have no idea of when the crossing occurred. In the case of Syrah, the first mention in historical document was in 1781, which is quite recent in terms of history of a grape variety.
After the discovering of the parents of the Syrah, the cross point of these 2 grapes was around Hermitage. So they could demonstrate that the real birthplace of Syrah was Hermitage.
So Syrah is a native French vine, but the story of the name Shiraz is far from over. How is it that when we drink a glass of Syrah, it's often called Shiraz? We have a Scot to thank for that. In the early 19th century, James Busby toured the vineyards of France and wrote his observation down in a journal. In 1832, he took Syrah vines from Hermitage to Australia and planted vineyards. It was the beginning of a fantastic viticultural success story. Outside of France, Australia is the biggest producer of Syrah. But down under, these vines and the wine they produce are all called Shiraz. Shiraz is now a brand name marketed across the globe. How did the wine acquire its new name? One theory is that Busby simply made a mistake.
The labeling of the vine that arrived in bunches was probably difficult to read, so that Busby spelled it wrongly. He spelled it S-C-Y-R-A-S. And if you pronounce it the Australian way, you would pronounce it Shiraz. So the use of the name Shiraz in Australia comes from a mispronunciation of the variety.
But it is possible that Busby didn't make a mistake, that it was intentional. Busby's journal of his visit to Hermitage has a footnote that directly refers to the legend. It reads, according to the tradition of the neighborhood, the plant Shiraz was originally brought from Shiraz in Persia. So the name Shiraz was known to Busby and may not have been a mispronunciation. What is known for sure is that the French in the 19th century were importing wine from warmer climates to bolster the alcohol content of their own.
We have to keep in mind that we had some time much colder in the past. The Rhone used to be frost every winter. They were importing wine from warm countries, from Iran. That was the perfect sort of wine, where probably the wine was very sweet, had a real concentration.
I wonder if Busby called the new vines in Australia after Shiraz in deference to Shiraz wine's exotic past. It remains a mystery. While I was studying in Hungary, I'd heard about a vineyard producing a Shiraz wine. Rumors were it was directly connected to Iran.
Balaton, the largest lake in Central Europe, surrounded by beautiful vineyards, producing lovely wines. But the main reason I am here is a very special vineyard which has been grown from a cutting taken directly from Shiraz over 3,000 miles away.
The man behind this venture is winemaker Hubas Ramlay, who fell in love with Iran and who has an extraordinary tale to tell.
Hubas, tell me about your love affair with Iran.
Ez több volt, mint egy egyszerű szerelem. Ez már 70-ben lehetett, 69-70. Télvíz idején két barátommal elindultunk autóval, és akkor megérkeztünk Iránba. Méghozzá, egész érdekes módon, Khomeiniba.
He ended up living in Iran for almost a decade.
Most lent voltam Perzsiában, akkor 80-as évekig, amikor jött a Khomeini, nem tudom, hogy melyik volt, az már 80 húha. Közel voltam, sőt személyesen ismertem a Gholam Rezáékat, és ugyanakkor a Khomeininek a családját Khomeiniból.
He eventually returned to Hungary, but Iran had left its mark on Huba.
Tell me, when did you start making wine?
About 90 körül kezdtem el itt a szőlővel foglalkozni. Még hozzá volt egy barátom, aki már meghalt, ő szintén borászkodott, és ővele mentünk le Perzsiába is. Az első Shirázt tilos volt kihozni, de főleg behozni tilos volt, de behoztuk.
How did you get the wine out?
Én, ha lehetett, mindig autóval mentem, jöttem Perzsiából. Legalább ezt az utat Perzsia és Bécs között megtettem. Már voltak, akik ismertek is a határon, főleg a perzsa oldalon, nem volt probléma.
Back in Hungary, Huba created a vineyard from the Iranian vine and has been making and selling his Shiraz wine ever since.
So, Huba, this is your Shiraz vineyard, right? Yes?
Yes.
This is beautiful, overlooking the lake and the volcanic hills. How big is it?
More than 3 acres.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Huba, how the lake affect this grape?
The lake is our second sun.
So it's
Because
really
the
effective.
reflection from the sea.
And does it affect the quality of wine you will make?
Of course.
We don't know if any of Huba's vines are directly related to the Shiraz vines of old. But being here reminds me of home.
The smell of this wine transporting me back to my youth in Iran. I used to play with my sister around these kind of vines. It makes me nostalgic.
My final stop on this Shiraz adventure is to America, home to over 1 million Iranians. The United States is the largest wine producer outside of Europe, with 90% of its wine coming from the Sunshine State of California. Defined by mountain ranges and influenced by its proximity to the Pacific Ocean, Napa Valley has the perfect climate for wine production. European vines were planted here over a century ago, with Syrah vineyards established in the area in the 1970s. The wine here is marketed under the French name Syrah, with one notable exception. I'm on my way to meet a winemaker who almost uniquely in Napa Valley calls his Syrah wine Shiraz. At first glance, it looks like a set from Hollywood's golden age. But actually, it's a winery.
The history of winemaking in Iran has been long forgotten in the midst of time. But one Iranian has traveled across the globe and brought here to California the hospitality and splendor of Persian culture.
Dariush Khaledi is from Shiraz. He's named after the Persian king Darius the Great, who built the palace of Persepolis 2,500 years ago.
When we start thinking about what kind of building, my architect he said, you know, the name of the wine is Dariush, and you have a picture of Darius the king on the label. Why don't we make the palace of Dariush here? It is not the replica, but it has the accent of the Persepolis and the feeling of the Persepolis. We have many visitors, and some of them are Persian. Some of them come from Iran. They have a tear in their eyes because they see the feeling of the home here, right in the middle of the nowhere in Napa. You know, there are many, many good memories that I have from Shiraz. It's a beautiful city and the weather is just perfect, especially in the springtime. The Shirazi people are very happy people and they like to enjoy with their wine, especially with especially the Kholar wine, which, by the way, our Shiraz vineyard here, we call it Kholar. So in a memory of Kholar.
Kholar in Iran was a once thriving winemaking region 60 kilometers from Shiraz city. Shiraz wine is top of the agenda, as Dan De Polo, Dariush's right-hand man, hosts a wine tasting for potential buyers.
So this is the 2008 Shiraz. These are 35-year-old vines. This is what's great about Shiraz, is it's always been a very soulful wine to me. Shiraz is about, more of the heart, and for Dariush, it's more about his history and his culture. He had to make it in Napa.
So to be honest, I like this one.
Oh, you like the Shiraz?
Yes.
Yeah, this
There are 120 acres of vineyards with 2 blocks dedicated to growing Shiraz.
I remember my father winemaking, for hobby, not as a profession. And I remember they was bringing the grapes and putting it in a big clay vat. I was going on top of that clay vat and smelling and enjoying that wine. Sometimes stole a sip of that wine. The glass of wine came later in Shiraz. They were drinking, I remember as a child, in a sabu or a clay vessel. So that's how they were. And it wasn't just drinking wine. You have to read some poet and talk about Hafiz Shirazi, and about wine. And and it wasn't just drinking wine, it was a venture or among the family.
What about the name? Shiraz is a very unique name.
I cannot say that I'm impartial with Shiraz wine. I keep telling my French friends, they said, Shiraz or Syrah come from Rhône, and it's been 500 years of the history that we have on that. I said, yeah, but I opened the atlas of the world. There is only one place in the whole world called Shiraz and has a 7,000 years of history of wine growing. So you tell me where the Shiraz come from.
During the course of my journey, I have discovered that Iran and wine production have gone hand in hand for over 7,000 years. The Shiraz wine of old was praised by poets, drunk by Shahs, and exported abroad. Today, the name Shiraz lives on in the vineyards and wines of the New World. It seems fitting to conclude my quest in California in the Shiraz vineyards of Dariush. Here, I feel the spirit of our faraway homeland, and its fabled wine lives on.